skilling can get you a job, why do you need a degree? Success is all about how much wealth you have.
It's not a correct answer.
It would never be the correct answer. Even the wealthiest man would want to be a Nobel laureate, or like if you look at our own Indian politicians, the wealthiest man want to be in the city of governance. Yeah. If there was no access to good education, I would not be sitting where I am sitting right now. I've studied with the richest kids in the country as much as kids who can't afford 2 square meals a day. I always say that, you need to find a space. If you're a hugely popular platform, you need to find spaces where you only talk of these kind of things so that you create a narrative. In my opinion, when the fee is lower, then a student has an option saying, okay, after this, I don't want to work for a corporate thing, I want to start an NGO. But when you have a 30 lakh loan on your head, you want to pay off the EMI, so you get onto the corporate side. And once you get into a regular salary, it's an addiction. It's a drug. You don't get away from it. We'll continue to impact lives, continue to raise issues that are important for the student community. We'll continue to fight for what is good for the country.
So sir, before we start, I wanted to know who's Maheshwer Peri, where do he comes from, family में कौन-कौन है, जो हमें internet पे नहीं मिलता.
I think, unfortunately or fortunately, most of what I am, कहीं ना कहीं मैंने अपने आप को put myself in front of the people actually in a sense, because मैं लिखता हूँ अपने बारे में, अपने ज़िंदगी के बारे में, and that obviously people do pick up, bits and pieces of that and put it up. But the thing is, most Indians, when you look at the founders around or the CEOs around and all, you notice one common thread, which is that they came up the hard way. They came up because their parents invested in education. Yeah. And once they reached a point, they decided to be entrepreneurs or leaders in their own spaces. And that's something that I am also, right? That came up the hard way, worked the hard way, went through public education ecosystem, where if the education was not affordable, I might not be where I am sitting right now. If there was no access to good education, I would not be sitting where I am sitting right now. And also, mingled and mixed with people who came from very, very different spaces, different zones. I've studied with the richest kids in the country as much as the kids who can't afford 2 square meals a day. So there is a lot of understanding about what the world is, what the society is, what education means to them, how they use education to be the most, or how they used education to be where they are at this point in time, and in turn actually getting so many people employed and creating so many jobs and all. So I come from a similar space as I think most of the new age entrepreneurs come from.
Okay, sir. In many of your discussions and panel discussions, you have said that in Indian education system, there have been a lot of innovations like introducing of NITs, IITs, IIMs. And in last 20-25 years, we have not seen any innovation in Indian education sector. Though I see online education now, do you think it's an innovation, sir?
See, it was always there. It's bound to go in that space. The question that we're talking of is how much of innovation has benefited Indian ecosystem, right? Online education has been there or would be there. The more technologies move in a certain direction, the world adapts that, and India would also be adapting that. The question that I would always work on is how did India use that space to benefit itself a lot more? That is when innovation comes in. Otherwise, you're just adapting. There is no option for you but to adapt, right? When everything is moving towards technology, you can't say that I don't want to adapt technology or adopt technology. But how did India use that online education space? There are a lot of things that we need to still do. We are not there anywhere actually. And we are there because it's there. I don't think we had a choice of moving in that direction. But how did we use it to benefit a larger population? I think we still need we still have a long way to go.
So do you think it solves the problem of affordability and accessibility? Because a lot of Indians cannot afford the education. In many of your panels, you said that cost of education is going higher. Every year it's going higher.
Precisely the question that when I say innovation, that I'm coming from that perspective. If technologies are supposed to ensure that there's greater access and lesser cost, the lesser cost has not been solved because India is adapting to technology more and more year on year, but the cost is also going up year on year. And both these things are not in sync with each other, or at least with the larger objective of what India kind of a country should be doing. So for me, the first failure is that we adapted technology, but the cost has been rising. How does this happen? These two should not happen at the same time, right? That's the first part of it. The second thing is, when you talk of, again, access to education, of course, I think there is a lot more access to education than what it was earlier. But you should keep a very, very watchful eye on how equity might be compromised because you're pushing technology so far. Rather, you're bullying your way through in terms of adapting of technology, that areas and spaces which are not accessible for technology might just fall apart of the map of education ecosystem. And that is very careful. Right? Recently, we've done a very good study. If you look at NEET as an examination, NEET is a pen and paper examination, right? And there's very interesting data that you can use. The NEET centers were in about 575 cities or towns in the country, right? And there are about 4,500-5,000 centers in these 575 cities / towns / whatever you call it. Of this 575, if I remember correctly, about 235 of them had some kind of a coaching institution because we mapped it to the top 25 coaching centers in the country, institutions in the country. So about 235 of them had some kind of presence of a coaching institution from one of these top 25.
Okay.
And 331 of them don't have any presence from the top 25 coaching institutions. And of course, the assumption here is that if it's a good market, one of these 25 would set up shop there, right? It's a different matter whether I'm talking of, entrance exam. I'm not getting into that debate. I'm now talking of how access to coaching versus no access to coaching, how it's impacting. The 331 cities succeeded for 11% of the students. And the 235 cities took 89% of the seats.
Those who have coaching centers support. Okay.
Now you talk to me whether there is access to education. So when I talk of technology being pushed so hard, now this is, of course, the government is not pushing because the exam is pen and paper, but coaching was there, right? So very clearly, if you were to just push your technology into the space so hard, you will actually have lots of people falling away because they don't have access to that space, which is access to digital technologies, access to internet, access to bandwidths, and whatever you may call it, right? And that might be a very dangerous thing for us to do also, right? There are two things, as you said, access and affordability. Affordability, the price is going up where the more we adapt to technology. And two, access, I think we have a long way to go. It's not a wrong way. The direction is correct. But we should be keeping our eyes and ears open for certain kind of spaces. So for example, if I were to be the minister at this point in time, I will say in these cities and metros, it will be only online. In these cities, we are also giving you a space for offline. Instead of saying, oh, everything is computer-based testing. I'll be very careful about doing those kind of things. Because you don't have access, उधर आपको internet नहीं मिलता है, आपको bandwidth नहीं मिलती है, and you're talking to students to study. See, entrance exam is all about muscle memory.
Yeah.
You go there, you know what to expect. You know that, these are how the questions come, this is how you need to respond, and this is how you will actually correct it. And every minute matters. Now imagine a bunch of kids who've not got a computer and they're supposed to open the computer, look at the question paper and start responding.
I've heard that CUET is also coming online.
Exactly. I know that, right? So now that creates a own benchmark. Like you said, CUET, 50% of the students, like in Delhi, thankfully or unfortunately or fortunately, most of it is through government schooling system. Yeah. Because our government has really pushed itself on the government schools. Now these kids have one class a week where they have access to computer.
Right.
And then you have the 20% kids who are working in CBSE, in private schools who have access to only computer and nothing else. They only have a screen in front of them through a mobile or a system, right? Now those 20% who exactly know how systems work are competing with these kids who have access to computer 1 hour a day, a week. Now that, I think, is a very unfair way of competing against each other, right?
That's inequality. So do you think today's students with online learning are missing out on vibrant college life and those crucial extracurriculars? And is offline the only way to get a well-rounded education? See,
we run companies and we always want to see people working in teams.
Right.
The social interaction that students have or employees have leads to a lot of work efficiency or work inefficiency, right? So if you were to deal with students who are closeted in their own rooms and still studying and passing out an examination, the social exchange and the learnings that come from social exchanges would be completely missing out. And two, like I studied in a government school, right? And that helped me a lot to understand what the ecosystem is, right? I would have friends who would not go back to their home when it's only a 1 week holiday because the bus charges would be expensive enough for the child to say, no, it's not worth going there. Money was important for them. And I also studied in the same college where a minister's son would be studying and he would, every week, on a weekend also, a car will come, pick them up and go back, right? Now, I observe those things, and to that extent, I have a lot more empathy that I discuss these kind of subjects a lot more, right? So, for anyone, you can be a manager or a vice president of an MNC, or you can be a leader. There is a big gap between the two. For you to be a leader, you need to have empathy. You need to have understanding of every section of society and have a broad understanding that a person who doesn't have access to education, if he gets 70%, access to coaching and gets 70%, is equivalent to a student who's got everything going for him and is going through coaching and has got 95%. If you don't correlate that, then you're just dealing with numbers and you will also be a number at some point in time.
So many young people, especially Gen Alpha, the next generations, are questioning the need of college degrees. Gen Alpha are ditching college degrees for social media fame and learning on the go. Is the future of education or a formal schooling still relevant?
See, I think I'm very clear what the question is. The question is about if skilling can get you a job, why do you need a degree? Then you'll always be an employee. See, if your objective is just to be an employee and work for someone else, a skilling would be good enough for you. If the objective is to get out of the first job, then a skilling is good. A degree or a college gives you a totally different perspective altogether. And the perspective is that, you'll learn history and you'll still be dealing with math.
Right.
You'll be dealing with a student who's learning politics and has a different point of view versus a person who's learning science and saying, hey, what is politics all about? And these things is what a person is all about. You're not a STEM student or a politics student or a history student. You're all of the same. It's just that you're specializing in certain things and you're learning a lot. To confuse, learning and knowledge to skill is very, very petty. It's like confusing that success is all about how much wealth you have.
It's not a correct answer.
It would never be the correct answer. Even the wealthiest man would want to be a Nobel laureate, or like if you look at our own Indian politicians, the wealthiest man want to be in the city of governance, right? And they want to make a difference from that perspective, or they want to, right? So the wealthy men are striving for acknowledgement on different parameters. So this entire thing of trying to confuse skilling with learning and knowledge are very, very different things. Skill gets you a job, but you'll only be in that. Let's assume for a moment that you only learned coding. Now, what in coding after AI?
Yeah. It will be no
right. I remember in COVID times, you actually had a situation where a lot of students were doing MBA in hospitality, hospitality management, but hotels were closed. And there was no placement at all because the hotels were now then shedding people.
Yeah.
What next? So people who are doing offline courses, they suddenly jump to customer service and those kind of things. Because the learning there make them flexible and agile enough to say, okay, what's the next big opportunity in the space? Yeah. And all these people started getting into customer service and anything to do with customer engagement. So they moved away from hotels and started getting into these companies where calling and interaction with customers was happening a lot more. Now, online, you learn hospitality management, you only know how hotels work and what happens and what next. And how do you interact with people? How do you deal with these kind of situations? So that's a different thing altogether. So for me, you need to attain skills, but if you're skilled in one particular thing and the skill is at some point in time is not needed, now what? Whereas knowledge and learning would always be things. Like for example, all of us now, I studied commerce. I'm a CA, I was an investment banker, then I became a media man, now I'm an education counselor.
Yeah.
If I was only skilled in that part, which is accounting and finance, now what? So those are issues that you must deal with.
That's a wonderful answer, sir. I've got today, sir. So students are drowning in education debt. How can we make education more affordable, and what role is Career 360 playing in this?
I think you must keep raising issues to do with affordability. All we can do as, if there's a chorus, today there are few voices that are talking of affordability. I'm hoping at some point there will be a chorus, because this cost is unbearable. My generation
didn't know about education loans.
There was nothing called education loan.
We didn't know.
If you have an admission now, you talk to 5 relatives, they pull in the money, and that was good enough for you to pay the fees. Now, you want to get into any private institution, you cannot fund it out of your revenues. Yeah. You have to fund it through a capex. When did this transition happen? That what was supposed to be a revenue expenditure has now become a capital expenditure. And that's a question that we need to keep asking. And it comes back to cost of education. Why did cost of education become so expensive? Like right now, when I look at some of these, even public institutions, and for me, I blame IIMs a lot more for the way they've structured themselves. You don't charge 30 lakh rupees after having been around for so many years, doing so many consulting projects, being on government land, government buildings, everything funded by government, and you charge 30 lakh rupees and lead the way in terms of how MBA education is becomes expensive. You led the way. You did not lead the way. You took anyway the cream, anyway they would have been placed wherever they were. Yeah. But you led the way in terms of the cost increase. Right. And then now other institutions also are going the same way. So we need to keep fighting the cost of education, and we need to keep ensuring that you don't need to, education should be funded from your income, not from your sale of assets.
Right.
And it should not be driven by loans also. So I do squirm when I see these kind of things, and when say, oh, there's a great opportunity, there's a great business opportunity. Well, everything is a business opportunity, right? So if I were to keep threatening you that I'll kill you, and you appoint 4 security people, then security agency, private guards is a business opportunity. But that is to do with the lack of, legal framework or moral framework, right? Yeah. So how do you deal with that?
So since you love sports, I have read somewhere that you used to play cricket in your schooling days. Why do chess champions like Gukesh struggle to find sponsors unlike cricketers? I guess education should be backing them, right? What's your take on this?
Yeah, I think, of course, increasingly those people also are finding a sponsor, but they don't have a celebrity status. Yeah. The celebrity status is driven by mass hysteria, right? And the mass hysteria doesn't understand chess. For example, yesterday Konero Hampi became the world champion in rapid chess. I did not see even a small headline anywhere. Which is so unfortunate, which is again driven by media, because media again covers what has mass consumption, right? So I always say that, you need to find a space. If you're a hugely popular platform, you need to find spaces where you only talk of these kind of things so that you create a narrative. See, I'm not saying that you should always create your own narrative, right? You should always go by what people want. But at times now you should also lead the way in terms of covering certain things so that people also start following that. And that power is not being used properly by the mainstream media or the mass media. And that creates its own thing. Like when you see in movies now, you actually have a few movies on cricket, but you don't see a movie on how a chess player became the world best. You will have movie on the 10th best cricketer in the country, but you will not have the best chess player ever through the world, and there would not even be a documentary on him.
I do not remember any movie, any Bollywood
exactly. Movie. So those kind of things, and you need to deal with that.
So it's the same question about skills and degrees. Kamala Harris also says that degree isn't everything. Do you agree? Are we overdoing the need of the degree?
Yeah. I think, see, again, let's not confuse skills and degree to knowledge and learning, जो मैंने बोला था, right? I have never said, or I would never say that a degree gets you learning and knowledge, right? We should deal with these two things separately. The only thing that a degree does is it pushes you towards a interaction in a college or something where you actually sit there, study and all. Now, if you deal with an online degree, again, it's a different space altogether, right? There is no need for a degree. I agree with that. As long as a student comes out more knowledge, more informed and so on and so forth. Like if you look at some of the better institutions in the country at this point in time, they're not giving proper degrees, but there's greater learning out there, right? And that is very important. Like for example, Ashoka started with the scholarship that they had, right? Now, the students who were those fellows had more understanding of the world around them than a proper degree student. Similarly, if you look at B schools at this point in time, ISB Hyderabad is not a degree granting institution.
It's not autonomous.
But there is greater knowledge, there is greater understanding of the business ecosystem, and there are greater interactions. So you can keep quoting reams and reams of people who are not degreed but are more informed and knowledgeable. So I'm not never confusing saying degrees versus skill versus, no. I'm saying knowledge and learning versus anything that's on this side.
So that Peri Peri article changed everything. How was your journey evolved since then, and how was Career 360 impacted Indian education?
No, I don't think it changed everything. A lot of stuff that was written about me, good, bad, ugly, and I'm okay with that. See, always, from the kind of background I come from, I was always conscious. Like right now, if I were to sit in Delhi, I will know about 20 civil servants or IAS officers who studied with me and would be in different ministries at this point in time. But they came from places where you would not even imagine they could be sitting there. They studied hard, worked hard, cracked an examination, sat there, and they would never forget their roots. And it goes back to that. Have we as a country ever tried to understand why is it that fewer IIMs and IITs are sitting in public spaces or in government positions? If we understand that, we'll crack that model. Because when you get into a B school, you're only taught how to run an organization which is for profit.
Right.
And when the fee goes up, like earlier days, in my opinion, I don't have data to prove this, but in my opinion, when the fee is lower, then a student has an option saying, okay, after this, I don't want to work for a corporate thing, I want to start an NGO. But when you have a 30 lakh loan on your head, you want to pay off the EMI, so you get onto the corporate side. And once you get into a regular salary, it's an addiction, it's a drug. You don't get away from it. So from that kind of a thing, my simple thing is, how do I, who's prospered or grown because of public education ecosystem, because of government funding, because of scholarships that I had. Like those days, when I was in Andhra, there used to be a scholarship for the top 10 in the district. And I got that, because of which I studied. I lost my father very early. So
at the age of 17.
It had to be funded, and it was funded. So a lot of things that I'm sitting here now is because the governments of those days invested in people like me to ensure that we're studying, and it's not especially for me. I was a meritorious student, so I got a scholarship. But the fee was otherwise affordable also. So initially that was the case, right? So I am sitting here because I benefited out of that system, and I would want many more people to benefit out of that system. So my thing about my overall perspective is that for a country which says that we will earn the demographic dividend, they don't understand that dividend comes when you invest in something.
Right.
There is no dividend when you don't invest, right? And we stopped investing in education. We stopped investing in our youth. We stopped investing in our younger population to make them productive enough so that they can contribute to the nation building. And that, you simply can't do that, because over 10-15 years, you will suddenly see a bigger problem in your hand, that you only have those people who are sitting with EMIs and who can afford, where the banks could give a loan, and you have another bunch of people who could not afford education, so they fell off the system. And then there is nothing called demographic dividend. As a country, if you believe that your biggest resource is you call yourself the youngest populated country, whatever, then you must invest in them. Otherwise, it's meaningless. And the other thing, Rohit, which always bothers me is that each of us now, we do everything to ensure that our children are studying. So if my child gets a seat in a very, very good college, say Oxford or whatever, and the fee is very high, I'll do everything to ensure that I fund it.
Yeah. You'll sell your land, you'll sell
most
your
parents would do
jewelry,
that.
anything.
But the moment I become a minister, I stopped doing that.
Yeah.
I started thinking of this as another subject altogether. Yeah. Why is it that you behave differently for your own children versus when you deal with it for the children of the country?
Yeah.
You can be a bureaucrat or a minister or a person who is in power, but you behave differently for your own children vis-a-vis the way you behave with the children of this country, and that bothers me a lot. If I were to be sitting there, if I know that, like in my family, about 20% of the our income or 25% of our income goes into ensure that my children are studying. But when you come to the country, it's 3%. That is wrong.
Yeah,
patently wrong.
That's irony. Yeah. So I came to know that at the age of 17, you lost your father, and you got an option where you were getting a job, but you didn't opt it for that job, and you continued your education. in Andhra Pradesh and Hyderabad, in which civil court you were getting. So is it true that you didn't go for that job?
No, it is my mother actually. Again, one of the reasons why I started a counseling platform is essentially that, because there was someone who came and told me that, of course, I lost my father when I was very young and I was still studying. And typically on sympathy grounds, na, आपको सरकारी में मिल जाता है कि the child gets a job. If the parent was working but he passed away, you would get that job, right? But my mother was very keen that I was study because I was a good student by then. By then I became a good student because my father suffered before he passed away. He was unwell and those kind of things. And then a counselor, I will call him a counselor, but he's a relative, came and said, listen, you can exercise the job over 3 years. So you can say no to the job after up to 3 years. So basically he gave me a 3 years time to decide whether I want to take it up or not. And the 3 years was good for me. I became a CA. I became a topper.
You became a topper in Andhra Pradesh first and 23rd in India, I guess.
Yeah. So that's because see, most of us now, when our back is to the wall, we react differently. When we have luxury of time, we will react differently. But when your back is to the wall, you only react in one single way. Because you say, okay, I only have 3 years. How do I do it? Otherwise, I'll go back and become a clerk somewhere else. And I don't want to be that way, right? So that's what happened. And for me, that relative is my counselor in my head, because he told me, he went through the rules and came back and said, Mahesh, you can exercise that option over 3 years. So you have 3 years to decide what you want to be. That was good for me. And my mother was always there saying he wants to study, so let him study and we'll deal with life over the next 3 years. So both these were instrumental in the fact that today when I created a counseling organization, it's essentially to help these kind of kids who don't have a pathway, who are lost. So my platform doesn't advise you whether IIM Ahmedabad or Bangalore is good. I think either way you go, it's good for you.
Yeah.
My problem is when you're not in the primary, which is India, everyone says कि मुझे IIM में पढ़ना है, IIT में पढ़ना है, IAS करना है, वगैरह वगैरह. If you don't get there, what next? And that is where students get lost, because students typically have a plan A and they don't have a plan B.
Right.
So I am here trying to say, don't worry, you could not get into plan A because only 1% of Indians get into that. The other 99% students still need a chance in career and future, right? Which is what we do.
Because ये 99% वाले 10% भी नहीं होते और majority 50 से 80% वाले होते हैं जिनको कुछ नहीं पता होता कि कहाँ जाना है.
Absolutely.
Sir, what's next for Career 360? And for you as an entrepreneur, what's your plan for the future?
Well, we'll continue to impact lives. We'll continue to raise issues that are important for the student community. We'll continue to fight for what is good for the country. And we'll do all these things in a very healthy compromise. Every single day I compromise. Every single day when I come to the office, आते हैं कि सर ये client ये बोला है, can you do this? ये किया है, can you do that? The thing is, where do you draw that line? The line for some is very close to the chest, for some it's here, for some it's very far, right? That's what it is. All of us live in the grey shades. All of us do things which might not be the most correct thing at that point in time, right? For me, I will do many things as long as I'm not hurting a student, where at some point in time I'll carry the guilt of misleading a child to a wrong place. That's my Lakshman Rekha. As long as you don't cross that line, within that, now you call me grey, I'm in grey. But I'm telling you that I'm not completely correct most of the times. I'm not doing everything that my heart says every single time, because I want to also run an organization. And to run an organization, you need to be surviving and you need to be there. You don't kill yourself in pursuit of your principles so much that you're not there at all, and there is no one to fight for the children on the other side. So my important task is to ensure that I am around, I survive, I keep growing, and I keep raising those issues. And all these things need to go together. It cannot be that I keep raising issues so much that I die, and there is no one left to raise up issues.
Sir, based on my conversation with Sarvesh Agarwal, the founder of Internshala, he said that Internshala was built by the interns. What kind of a team were you looking at when you started Career 360?
I was looking for people who have benefited because of the Indian education ecosystem, and I was always looking for people who understood that education is important for people's growth and prosperity, and country's growth and prosperity. And thankfully, I've always found those kind of people. Because, see, there are good people around, there are committed people around.
There are more good people than bad people in the world.
And a lot of convictions about it. And the other thing that happens is, I always say, for most of the battles that I fight, a lot of people might hate me internally, but they would want to be seen with me externally. I'm okay with that also, right? Because if you're true, if you're correct, then people would not be able to take a public posturing against you at some over a period of time, because they don't want to be seen with the right? So a lot of people are with me because they're good. A lot of people are with me even though they are bad, because they want to be seen with the good.
Right.
And either way it benefits me. So I think there is good business viability in being good and correct. Let me put it that way.
So how did your own education and work experience shaped you as an entrepreneur? Were there any specific lessons or skills that were particularly valuable? Because you come from a finance background, being an investment banker, then be in a journalism, and then going forward to an entrepreneur.
So one thing that obviously, see, if I was an investment banker, I would have died as an investment banker, honestly, right? It so happened that I joined Hathway Investments, which launched Outlook, the magazine. And at Outlook, a lot of things for me changed, because we saw a lot of stuff that the world doesn't see. We saw a lot of pain, we saw a lot of suffering, we saw a lot of hope when they see you, that you will get them justice. And that power could have been misused or used the right way.
Right.
And, as a person who benefited out of people's goodness, I possibly started using it because I benefited from that system, right? So one thing that very clearly changed my direction was when I was at Outlook, because I did see suffering, pain, and hope. And I wanted to be that beacon of hope. So when I launched education, I could have launched another film magazine and, mingled with Shah Rukh Khan and Salman Khan. But I chose this path because I think, when I was at Outlook, I was a mainstream media publisher, right? As a media publisher, you could have gone into things which give you clout and power and influence, which was being another news magazine or another business magazine or another celebrity magazine. But I chose this side of it because I felt that, I can use that knowledge and understanding of the ecosystem to benefit a larger population, and that's where I started Career 360. So very clearly, Outlook shaped my direction in launching Career 360.
Sir, if you could go back, what career advice would you give to your younger self, a major career mistake that you would like to avoid?
Nothing, honestly.
Nothing?
Nothing, honestly nothing. See, the thing is, when I did CA because there was no fees. And there was an internship stipend that was coming away. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done CA. I did write MBA examination for Usmania, and I did not, because that exam was 3 days after I lost my father. So there was no way I was in the mental state to even write an examination. And I did CA because there was no fees. The current MBAs now, I would have stopped with graduation and then moved on with something else, because I can't afford this kind of fee structures, right? So I would not change anything, because this was an essential path for me to be what I am at this point in time, that I benefited. Then, like for example, at Careers now, we always keep working on low-cost education wala, and like for example, you would always see a video saying low-cost MBA courses in India. Because I want to ensure that people don't find an excuse saying, "Mere paas paisa nahi, so I can't study further." It's very important for me to keep harping on that, and we always do that, because everyone deserves a chance.
Yes.
Whether you have money or you don't have money, you deserve a chance. And if you're a good student, these colleges will take you and the fee is lower. That's what we're coming at this point, right? So I would not change anything, because then if I'd benefited, if everything was hunky-dory for me, I would not be the person I am today.
So you have dedicated your career to education. What were your passion as a student? Does those interests lead you to where you are today?
Passion, at least in my times, when I was in class 10th, if I were to get into a BSRB job now, I was very happy. So objective at that point in time, I should get a good bank job and I will settle down. That is as small a...
उस समय passion नहीं होते थे कि पढ़ते हुए क्या बनना चाहते हो?
As you keep moving up the ladder, then you start, getting onto these things. Initially, it was all about survival and, having a settled, life. There was nothing called meaningful life or successful life. You are successful if you get a BSRB job or one of those APPSC job or something like that. So again, because people who coming from our kind of backgrounds, for them, the only goal that we see is to get a good job in a stable place. And that is what most India is even today as we sit now, right? I don't think we have the right to judge how people behave in different circumstances. Like I always say that when I go for interviews and all, some people say कि I will go to a job which gives me the most amount of money, right? And I'm not in a position to judge because maybe he or she needs the money to supplement their family income.
Right.
So who am I to judge sitting here saying no, you should go for a career and you should go for a good job and not for a good role and not for your money. Maybe they need the money desperately. So many a time I don't judge people on these kind of things, and I'm comfortable in that space that I created for myself. So from that perspective, initially the objective was to get into a good job, and later it changed when I cleared my CA. Obviously, because I was a topper, I got about 30-40 offers because all toppers do get letters and all, and I chose at that point in time the lowest paying but greater value job, which is being an investment banker in a public sector
at SBI
Capital Markets. There were many others also. I got many of these companies around, the FMCG companies and all. Because I chose that because I didn't want to be a backroom boy. Like in the other things now, in the FMCG companies, I was getting a job of internal auditor, this, that and all. Or, accounting consultant, these kind of things. But here I was becoming a front room person because you're dealing with investment banking. So you're using your knowledge at a front office kind of a thing. So that was the only thing that made me get into investment banking, because the others were paying at least 2x of what SBI Capital Markets those days was paying. SBI was paying me about 4,200 and these guys were paying about 7,500-8,000 rupees. And I'm happy I've done that because there I met a lot of people, and from there I moved to Hathaway Investments. Then we launched Outlook, and now I'm Career 360.
Sir, what are the key things students should look for in an online degree? How does Career 360 help them make the right choice?
I think the first thing they must look for is the institution that is giving the online degree has a good reputation of the same degree in an offline format. See, I've noticed a lot more universities, just because they have the power to give an online degree, are giving degrees in spaces where they don't have their own faculty or school on that. For example, I see a lot of people giving law degrees online, but they don't have a law school within their own system, it's very, very big. It happens a lot more in B schools. Most of the B school online degrees that you have are from institutions who are not the best in their own B school, in their own offline space, right? So I would always go for an online degree where at an offline level, that institution has excelled and is reputable for that particular course or degree.
Right.
If you do that first checkpoint, 85-90% will whittle away, and then you start dealing with it.
And how about rankings, sir? Can we trust NAC? It's a very, very difficult question to ask, but can we trust these rankings?
See, there is most rankings, you must look at it from a macro perspective of trying to say where you are, but not use it as a gospel truth. Because 2 days back I did a story on QS ranking, international ranking, and I found it to be not the fairest of the ranking that is there. There is a clear conflict of interest. There is clear, when you have 50% weightage to go into perception, in my opinion, IIPM would have ranked the best in perception at this point in time, and so on and so forth, right? So you need to use 3-4 rankings to understand and place this institution, and not just one ranking, because one ranking can be manipulated, but 3-4 cannot be.
Yeah.
When you do that, you will know where someone's place is, and you can take a broad consensus based on these 3-4. But if you find in one particular ranking someone excelling, in the other ranking they're below 100, then you know that there is something wrong with the whole thing, and that you must be very careful about.
Sir, the job market is changing very fast. What skills do students need today to success tomorrow? How can online degrees help them get those skills?
So again, here also, you need to have basic skills, which is about mathematics, about language, about communication, about social skills, about working in teams, about having a greater understanding of the world around you, and wisdom to understand that tomato is a fruit but cannot be used in fruit salad. So you need to deal with those kind of things. Any skill that you have today might be a dead skill 1 year down the line for whatever reasons. So you need to keep reskilling yourself, all that is correct, but more importantly, I think you need to have a broader understanding to make you flexible and agile to move between different skill sets with equal speed and not get stuck because you're not into that other space at all. So when you're choosing your online degrees also, specialization is good, but specialization gives you, puts you at a disadvantage if you're stuck somewhere. So you should have the broader foundation has to be intact, and then you can top up on that and then get into a specific skill and deal with that. But if you make the skill itself the broader platform, then you are having a problem.
So sir, as per you, what does the future of education looks like in 2025? How can platforms like Career 360 help students navigate these changes?
25 is next year. There is nothing much to it. See, I think there is nothing
It's
that
already
I can't change the system for 25. I think what one should be looking for is over the next decade, what should we be looking at? The government of India on one hand is saying that skills are very important. On the other hand, they have a target for GER.
Yeah, that's a both conflict of interest. Yeah.
Right. Now, when you have those kind of conflicting thought processes, then you will get into a problem yourself, because then you will start distributing degrees, or you will start opening up in such a place that everyone distributes degrees because you want to attain a 50 GER. It's much better. Like in my times now, we had ITIs, we had polytechnics, we had BTech degrees. Now everyone who wants to do ITA or polytechnic also is doing a BTech degree because you opened it up. And I'm not against opening up. Everyone must be dealing with an aspirational India, right? But then are you equipping themselves to be an engineer proper? So if you ask me over the next 10 years time, I would say, how can you ensure that people know exactly what they're getting into and what the outcomes would be? And you should be focused on the outcomes as a country and start investing from that spaces, that you need so many skilled workforce in this space. So I invest in so many ITS or so many polytechnics and all. I need so many engineers from this space, so I invest or open up so much. And there has to be a lot of clarity about that. That I'm creating a skilled workforce, I'm creating a manager, I'm creating a lead, whatever it is, right? And these people also should have an automatic choice of moving up the ladder and moving up, which is what AAA is at one point in time. So how do you, map out what the country needs and what the people of India aspire to be, and match the two, and ensure that your financial ability doesn't become a hurdle in you attaining those goals. So I would always back need-blind universities, which essentially is that if I got an admission, the college is responsible to ensure that you come in. Not because if you don't have money, you should not. I would enable you to do that because you found your way into the university, and it is my job to ensure that you get educated. Whether I fund you through a scholarship, through a loan, whatever it is, but you need to deal with those kind of situations. So I would ideally want an India where anyone who wants to pursue education pursues it despite their financial limitations. I would ideally want an India where every student is matched to his skill set or his information or knowledge levels, and then he or she is going through that pathway. And ultimately, this has to match up with the aspirations of the country of where they want to be and how they want to pursue themselves. And all these things must fit in. For that, there needs to be a larger overarching plan, and that everything must fit into that plan.
Right. So building Career 360 on a short string budget wasn't easy. How did you get those first users? Was there a breakthrough moment that really boosted traffic?
Again, I think students and the country is always yearning for an honest opinion.
Right.
Like if you look at my persona also, people talk to me because I give an honest opinion, right? I'm not rude when I'm talking about these things. It's an honest opinion.
But the harsh truth.
Yeah, right. But it's honest. It's not trying to pull down someone. It is always about pushing what is right and what should be the pathway for some of these things. And those kind of conversations always have an audience. Always have an audience. Right now, for example, we started a video division about couple of months back, and I'm doing videos now. It started with about 500 views. Now it's about 10,000 views. It will have its own pathway. That's because we speak honestly and we speak to the student. We don't speak on behalf of someone. We speak for the student, right? And those conversations will always have an audience. So when we started Career 360, we were speaking honestly of what is good for the student and what is bad for the student. And that found its own audience. when I see a lot of these people trying to create a behemoth with marketing dollars and all, I say, it would not work over the longer term. You can create a brand out of it, you can create something out of it, but the traction will continue to happen when you benefit the student. Like, what is the problem with EdTechs around us today? The EdTechs were driven by marketing guzzle than by driving student outcomes. None of these companies, even today, ever want to come up with a white paper on what the student outcomes were from the students that they came in for them. It can be coaching institutions driven by EdTech and all. None of them say that I had 10,000 students who came in and so many students passed out and so many were toppers. Which the offline guys do, by the way.
Yeah.
The colleges, they talk of how many students joined them and how many students were placed and what's the median salary, and they disclose that.
Yeah.
That's because regulatorily they're made to disclose that. The EdTechs don't do that. Most of the skilling EdTechs that you have around, I wish they were to say that, I had 100,000 students, because when they talk to their investors, they say we have 100,000 learners. But then you give me a hisab of how the 100,000 learners have done in the life.
But that investors will not ask for that now.
Yeah, which is where they fall. It's very short.
Lastly, sir, we have reached the end of the podcast. What is the one message that you would like to give to the students, the learners?
I think decide based on information and data and not based on perception. Perception is easily manipulated. Decide, and for everyone who wants to study, there are options around. Whether you have the money or you don't have the money, there are options around. But you need to work on that, research on that, and get there. And India needs people who want to invest themselves in education and then moving further. So I just hope that institutions will also understand that they have a role to play in India becoming prosperous. As education institutes, you have a larger responsibility than just dealing with your P&L and how much more profitable you are. So that's a responsibility on you people.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
My pleasure.